Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Michael of Knights of Entertainment. Today we have a overview of Season 2 of Goblin Slayer. We've already done Season 1 on the channel, so if you'd like to check that out, please feel free. This is for you, Independence Reno. Alrighty, so starting off where we left in Season 1, if we're continuing the episodes anyway, we start off with episode 13 or season 2, episode 1. Alrighty, so as spring arrives, Goblin Slayer finds himself at the site of his old village, which has been cleared out since the goblins raided it years ago, and silently takes in the new surroundings. Back in the frontier town, Priestess and the High Elf Archer obverse the numerous new applicants that are signing up to become adventurers, while Priestess giggles about their new senior position now. She begins her second year as an adventurer and mentions her next promotion review is coming up. The girls then take note of the letter they got from Noble Fencer, now styled as Female Merchant, who informs them she's building an adventurous training camp for the new rookies. As they discuss the possibilities of the camp, Dwarf Shaman and Lizard Priest show up and greet their fellow adventurers as the rookies admire them. Without fail, Goblin Slayer shows up in his usual to-the-point fashion, scaring the rookies, but is greeted warmly by his fellow veterans. He then takes all the goblin-slaying quests from the guild girl and decides to take a list of the ones the new rookies took so he can check on them as well, much to her approval. As he buys quite a lot of potions and antidotes, the rookies begin to gawk in a sense of admiration and fright of the man, as to be expected. While marking the potions, Goblin Slayer and Lizard Priest give advice to the rookie, Rhea Fighter, and advise her fledgling party to start slow and hunt giant rats as they go off goblin slaying. However, a red-haired rookie callously bumps into the priestess as they leave, but as he coldly brushes her off, something about his appearance reminds her of someone. Returning from the long day of goblin slaying, Goblin Slayer returns to the guild to make his report. However, he is alerted to a hump on a bench and prepares to fight with a potential goblin, only to find the rude rookie from before. Wizard Boy reveals he wishes for Goblin Slayer to teach him to slay goblins, but Goblin Slayer refuses, recognizing how wet behind the ears the young wizard is and seeing that he will not be a good listener, and instead advises him to go play it smart and start and slay the rats instead. Guild Girl takes his report and encourages Goblin Slayer to give the kid a hand for the night, as she reveals he can't afford a room, and Goblin Slayer takes him to the farm. At the farm, Goblin Slayer is greeted by Cowgirl, who playfully introduces herself as Goblin Slayer's wife to the gawking Wizard Boy, while Cowgirl's uncle isn't exactly keen on letting some strange rookie spend the night, especially after his rude attitude puts the farmer off. He relents after Goblin Slayer states Wizard Boy will be in the shed with him so he can keep an eye on him, and promises to actually get him some sleep himself, as the farmer was worried Goblin Slayer was running himself thin. The next morning, Goblin Slayer takes Wizard Boy back to the guild and once again encourages him to start slow and hunt rats, while he suffers from overeating Cowgirl's breakfast. Meeting up at with his party, Goblin Slayer finds them saddened as Priestess reveals she failed her promotion exam due to being a rookie amongst the seasoned veterans, which skews her success rate slightly. Hearing this, the veterans advise the Priestess to form a temporary party with her fellow rookie friends, like Rookie Warrior and Apprentice Cleric, or one of the new rookies to build a new relationship skills, or build her leadership skills. Despite this, however, Wizard Boy overhears her failure and loudly mocks her for it and accuses her of hiding in the corner as the veterans do all the work. As she tries to defend herself, Lizard Priest loudly reveals Wizard Boy's insults to Priestess is an insult to all priests, like himself and other priests in the guild. His claim is met with the rest of the priest classes in the guild and their friends, who immediately see Wizard Boy for the know-nothing know-it-all rookie that he is, and loudly dismiss him as another idiot rookie to his frustrations. He quickly and loudly announces his intentions to slay goblins and dismisses Goblin Slayer and his advice. Immediately, Female Knight interjects, as her usual bombastic fashion, complete with Heavy Warrior apologizing to everyone. He loudly challenges Wizard Boy to back up his empty claims and orders him to slay some goblins. However, Priestess will be the one to lead them, much to her shock. Going into episode 14, or season 2, episode 2. Arriving at the building site for Female Merchants Training Center, Goblin Slayer has Priestess take charge, as previously planned earlier for their latest goblin slaying quest with the braggadocio newbie Wizard Boy. Meeting with the foreman of the worksite, a relative of Dwarf Shaman, the foreman warned them of a mausoleum that has become infested with goblins recently. He also warned that the recent disappearance of an up-and-coming adventurer party that had been sent in earlier, as well as the goblins stealing tools, has led the foreman to believe that something else is leading the goblins and help them wipe out the party. While Wizard Boy is annoyed with this information gathering and planning, wanting to rescue any possible survivors from the doomed party and loudly complaining, High Elf Archer and Dwarf Shaman chided him, however, advising him to allow the leaders and the fighters to plan while the scouts and support prepare their supplies. Despite this, Wizard Boy remains an annoyance and dismissive of Priestess's leadership. At the mausoleum, the party makes their preparations, and as Lizard Priest gives his encouragement to Priestess for her debut as leader, along with everyone else, as he instructs the formation of the team, Wizard Boy remains his arrogant self and loudly complains. With this, both Priestess and High Elf Archer take a moment to have fun at his expense and his inability to listen, as he did not receive a sachet to mask his scent. He is forced to have Goblin Slayer gobbling guts all over him, much to his arrogant newbie's humiliation. Inside, the quest begins, and swiftly the vanguarded Goblin Slayer and Lizard Priest allow High Elf Archer to swiftly block the doors with wedges, so the party is not overwhelmed and is informed by Priestess to save their spells for later. Slowly and methodically, the party start clearing the rooms, so slowly that Wizard Boy impatiently breaks formation and falls for an obvious goblin trap, which loudly gives the party's position away. With that, Wizard Boy hears a woman scream and rushes ahead to find a goblin torturing Acolyte, the lone survivor of her doomed party. Horrified, Wizard Boy fires a fireball spell at the lone goblin, wasting his only usage for the spell, only for the rest of the horde to reveal itself with their troll leader. Realizing he has fallen for another obvious trap, Wizard Boy loudly warns the rest of the party to stay away, but they arrive in time to rescue him and Acolyte. Seeing the overwhelming odds, Priestess gives leadership to the party back to Goblin Slayer, who quickly devises a plan for them to fall back as the troll goes berserk, accidentally kills some of his own goblin soldiers thanks to his Goblin Slayer burning him with his Molotov cocktail. Rushing ahead, Priestess and the others find a room to catch their breath and check Acolyte's condition. And as her life is not endangered, Dwarf Shaman advises against using heal on her so Priestess can save her spells. Realizing his actions cost Priestess her leadership test, and his words of her hiding in the back were wrong indeed. Wizard Boy tries to apologize, but Goblin Slayer and High Elf Archer return with the burning troll hot on their tails. Realizing the troll is regenerating, Goblin Slayer asks for Priestess to cast Holy Light in the Dwarf Shaman to make rain, which is Kelpie spirit. With the troll blinded and freshly wet, Goblin Slayer douses him with a bomb of saltpeter. A chemical reaction of the heat and sudden cooling from the water causes the saltpeter to literally crack the troll's skin apart. Seeing the opportunity, Goblin Slayer and Lizard Priest slay the troll to Wizard Boy's amazement. He is then left amazed that despite the magnificent feat, all Goblin Slayer focuses on is the continued slaying of goblins. Later that night at the guild, the party celebrates their victory over the troll and pass more words of wisdom down to the Wizard Boy for his future requests. As High Elf Archer and the rest also encourage Priestess with her trial as temporary leader, the fate of Acolyte is revealed, with Priestess informing that she returned to the Temple of the Earth Mother for healing and was going to decide on her future whenever she recovered. However, Wizard Boy loudly remarked that she lost to goblins. Acolyte would never live it down to how people viewed defeat to goblins in the world. He then revealed the source of his bad attitude, revealing he is the younger brother of the deceased wizard, one of the doomed members of the Priestess's first party, and that her death to a poisoned goblin blade led her to be ridiculed by the peers that once praised her. Hearing this rant, Goblin Slayer orders the passed out Wizard Boy a room and leaves, passing Spearman and Witch, who sense something is bothering him. In an alley, Goblin Slayer berates himself for not being able to rescue Wizard a year ago, and for being the one to mercy kill her, depriving Wizard Boy of his older sister. Which he cries during that scene. Alrighty, moving on, we have Season 2, Episode 3, or Episode 15, if we're doing the continuation. So at the new training center, female knight trains Rhea Fighter in the ways of the sword, but becomes too overzealous and intense, not letting up on the new rookie, even a little as she begs for some breathing room. Watching on, Rookie Warrior and Wizard Boy worry about how they'll be treated as Spearman arrives to train them and decides to seriously train them whenever they take a shot at his abysmal luck with women. In another area, Goblin Slayer trains Apprentice Cleric and Druid Girl, who slings in a much more beginner-friendly way than the rest of his peers. As the young girls are more successful than the rest, much to Guild Girls' approval. As Cowgirl and Priestess arrive with lunch for the rookies, the tired rookies take a break with Priestess and discuss their careers and dreams. Rhea Fighter desires to break Rhea stereotypes and become a real warrior and not another scout or thief, while the rookie duo remark that while they are okay with their slow and safe take, that has to help them survive their first year. They were hoping to start picking up the pace. While Priestess is pleased with their dreams and goals, seeing as how the rest of the rookies see her as a rising star among them, Wizard Boy is still dismissive until Priestess reminds him of his deceased older sister. Wizard's dream of becoming a Dragon Slayer. As they continue on their break, Spearman invites Goblin Slayer on a guy's night out with him and Heavy Warrior. That night, Goblin Slayer heads out of the Broken Axe Tavern as Cowgirl pokes fun at his playdate, but is happy that he is interacting with his peers. At the tavern, the trio of veterans begin to discuss the current state of events with the rookies and the state of the world. While Spearman and Heavy Warrior try to make a more casual guy talk, Goblin Slayer is silent and gives his usual one-word answers, much to their amusement and annoyance. Afterwards, the trio begin to discuss what they plan for the future, as unlike the rookies, they have already gotten to the top, but realize that there is much more that they want to do with their lives. Goblin Slayer, however, remains quiet as he appears to silently contemplate his life as well. The next day, Dwarf Shaman tutors Wizard Boy in the magic arts of Goblin Slayer's request. While the headstrong magic school dropout tries to maintain his haughty and arrogant nature, he eventually breaks down and admits he knows only one spell, Fireball. Dwarf Shaman instantly berates the boy for not using his imagination and begins explaining how the boy can do more with less. Elsewhere, Priestess has lunch with Lizard Priest and Rhea Fighter. The trio eventually getting to how Priestess is trying to build her experience with her budding leadership. Excited, Rhea Fighter suggests Priestess take the other rookies on a mini quest as party leader and quickly assembles the other three rookies. At Lizard Priest's urging, Priestess agrees and goes off. As Wizard Priest looks on, happy she is among friends her age. That evening, Goblin Slayer and Cowgirl discuss their feelings on how the training center is built on the grounds that was once their home village, destroyed years ago in a goblin raid. While Cowgirl admits to having memories of her home, she accepts that times change and the land had to move on, much like he has changed from non-stop goblin slaying to now going with his colleagues and training rookies. While agreeing, Goblin Slayer admits he is torn and leaves to train the rookies. As he leaves, Cowgirl displays sadness that their love has yet to truly move on from his dramatic past, yet despite his recent steps in improvement. At the training center outskirts, a laborer finds a goblin and kills it before he is overpowered by more. The rookies hear the cries and wonder what is going on as Goblin Slayer prepares to go hunting. Alrighty, we're on to Goblin Slayer episode 16. Alright, so we have, with a surprise attack from the goblins at the training grounds, Goblin Slayer immediately goes into action and places Rookie Warrior in charge of the group of Rookie's defense formation, ordering them to stay put, play defensive, and retreat should he not return in a set amount of time. Wizard Boy quickly whips the scared rookies into formation as Rhea Fighter and Apprentice Cleric get ready to lend their support in case of emergency. On the hunt, Goblin Slayer finds overnight workers killed and runs into Priestess, as well as a fellow silver-ranked Spearman, Witch, and Heavy Warrior, who are shocked to see goblins coordinated such a bold and secretive surprise attack. Quickly, High Elf Archer, Dwarf Shaman, and Lizard Priest reveal themselves and begin to formulate a plan of counter-strike in defense of the two teams and rookies. Goblin Slayer decides to lead a team into the tunnels and slay the Horde, while Heavy Warrior remains behind to protect the rookies, and the High Elf Archer runs ahead to warn the town of the attack. However, Priestess immediately deduces the goblins are targeting the rookies, who went home for the night and volunteers to lead her rookie friends on a rescue mission to save them. Though the veterans admit the plan is excellent, they are worried about sending the rookies alone, but trust in Priestess to lead them. Remaining at the training grounds, Heavy Warrior takes on a hobgoblin, while the goblins indeed attack the rookies, who already left it for home, as Priestess deduced they would. As they are almost overwhelmed, Priestess and her team arrive, with Priestess and Apprentice Cleric administering much-needed first aid, while Rookie Warrior and Rhea Fighter hold the goblins off, with the horde being larger than they thought. Wizard Boy remembers Dwarf Shaman's advice and readies the team for a spell he casts, and a very loud shout spell. This is heard all the way back to the training grounds by Heavy Warrior, who scares the goblins into retreating. While their goal of rescue achieved, Priestess orders a strategic withdrawal to get the injured to safety. Underneath the earth, Goblin Slayer leads the veterans against the goblin horde, who are led by a shaman. Though High Elf Archer, who managed to warn the town and return in time, is annoyed the rest let Priestess go off alone with no veteran help, the rest tell her of their faith in Priestess. As the horde is larger than anticipated, Goblin Slayer devises a plan with the tunnels and the Dwarf Shaman spells, using his knowledge of the area. He has Lizard Priest cast Roar to force the goblins into retreat, and has Dwarf Shaman use Tunnel to bring the roof down, which opens the lake above them into the tunnels, drowning the horde. The next day, Priestess is promoted to Steel rank for her rescue mission by Guild Girl and Inspector, much to her party's approval and praise. Outside, Goblin Slayer sees Wizard Boy off as he decides to travel around and hone his skills, for now finally accepting everyone's advice that he may not be as ready as he thought. As he leaves, he moves on from his own sister's death and decides instead to just slay goblins to avenge her. He'll achieve her dreams of becoming a dragon slayer for her. Rhea Fighter decides to tag along on his adventure, much to his chagrin, which causes Goblin Slayer to laugh out loud and gives him words of advice and a potential contact. As they leave for their adventure, Cowgirl comes up to Goblin Slayer and notices he's in a little bit better spirits now, seeing that he may have made some peace with his past, which makes her happy. However, she playfully chides him for draining the lake from their ruined home village as they go back home. Moving on, we have episode 17. So at the guild, a mail carrier delivers the mail to the adventurers, including the High Elf Archer. Upon reading it, she announces, "It's time to get married," much to her party's shock. As she explains the formalities of the upcoming wedding and the inviting of the entire party to the wedding, Priestess wonders if she'll retire from adventuring. However, after some deduction, the party realizes that High Elf Archer is not getting married, but her older sister, Forest Princess, is. Goblin Slayer tries to get out of going, but Priestess pressures him into taking his teammate's sister's wedding and encourages him to finish goblin slaying quest so that he can keep the town safe while he's gone. Hearing about an elven wedding, Guild Girl fantasizes about the event and is invited to the High Elf Archer's +1, and pressured to go by Inspector as a form of vacation. With that, Inspector hands Goblin Slayer some emergency goblin slaying quests to be completed before the event, as High Elf Archer tries to explain that what an elephant is to Goblin Slayer. At a church in the forest, Goblin Slayer and the party slay all the goblins and rescue the captured, brutalized nuns who can be saved. As High Elf Archer scouts around and confirms all the goblins have been killed, as Dwarf Shaman scours the ruined library to find anything that can be salvaged from the sacred and lost tomes. In the main chamber, Lizard Priest confronts the women and offers words of healing and encouragement, as Priestess reveals her new miracle, Purify, which heals and cleans the women and the party. Dwarf Shaman then reveals he's found some ancient tablets the nuns were studying, and feels they should get them to a proper holy scholar. Back at the farm, Cowgirl rounds up the cows into their barn for the night as Goblin Slayer returns home. As she greets him and makes sure he is okay, Goblin Slayer brings up the coming wedding with the elves, which causes Cowgirl to remember Goblin Slayer promised to marry her whenever they were young, something he denies ever saying, though. Despite this, Goblin Slayer invites her as his plus one, much to her joy. The next day, the group arrive in Watertown, as the women splinter off to buy gifts for the wedding and to do some shopping of their own. Dwarf Shaman and Lizard Priest go off to secure rooms at the inn. Alone, Goblin Slayer takes the tablet to Sword Maiden for deciphering. As she promises to look into it, she reveals Noble Fencer has began her recovery and thanks him for taking her quest during the winter. As he leaves, Goblin Slayer inquires about Sword Maiden's mental health and encourages her to keep vigilant over the goblins. As well, she pouts that he won't stay with her any longer. Hearing he is leaving for the Elven lands, she warns him about the recent attack on the ship's route to the elves, believing goblins are afoot. Renting a raft, the group makes their way for the Elven forests. While admiring the beautiful landscape, the party starts to become wary of the large cliffs surrounding the narrow canal, and the sudden quiet of the forest. Quickly, the adventurers start to realize that there will be an ambush and take up defensive positions, with Cowgirl and Guild Girl being hidden under large blankets as rocks begin to fall from the cliffs. Moving into episode 18. So as the goblins attack Goblin Slayer's party on the raft, Priestess uses her barrier miracle to defend the party from the falling rocks. Goblin Slayer then uses a spear launcher to whittle away at the goblin horde, as Lizard Priest and Dwarf Shaman try to steer the raft to safety. However, the goblins have dammed up the river, causing the raft to halt and allowing the goblins to attack. As Dwarf Shaman prepares his Undine spell, Priestess quickly casts her new Purify miracle to break the trash apart, allowing the group to escape. Seeing an ongoing opening, Lizard Priest casts Roar, causing the goblins to scatter as the party floats to safety. At camp, the ladies change into swimwear and let their dresses dry and go into the river to catch fish for dinner and have fun. Goblin Slayer and the rest of the men begin building camp, for Goblin Slayer makes plans to go after the goblin nest. While eating their dinner, High Elf Archer explains that elf courtship works to prepare the party for the coming wedding. The next morning, High Elf Archer's cousin and groom of the coming wedding, Shining Helm, arrives to their camp and questions Goblin Slayer, and he confirms his guard eliminated the goblins from earlier. Shining Helm then demands to see High Elf Archer and finds her in a tent with the rest of the sleeping women, embarrassing himself for barging in on them. On his way to the Elven village, Shining Helm warns that the goblins have been more troublesome lately, hoping the famous Orkbold, Goblin Slayer's Elven title, could lend his expertise. However, he also warns that the one who stops the waters has been coming closer and closer to the village as High Elf Archer welcomes the party to her home village. As they unpack, Lizard Priest and Dwarf Shaman leaves to get food as Cowgirl, Guild Girl, and the Priestess go to freshen up. Alone, High Elf Archer returns to Goblin Slayer's bolas into a toy as her elder sister, the Forest Princess, arrives to greet her and Goblin Slayer. Goblin Slayer, however, sees her attendant and recognizes her as an elf captive from his first adventure with his party. He then informs her he killed all of her former tormentors, which caused her to break down in relief. Alone, Forest Princess admits she is not happy with High Elf Archer being an adventurer and wishes she would come back home to be safe with her, as well as admits that she's not happy that she's adventuring with a dwarf. As High Elf Archer defends her choices, Forest Princess questions why she is so intent on staying with the Goblin Slayer. However, as her and her sister trade polite barbs, the ground begins to shake and Goblin Slayer swiftly arrives with weapons and his Forest Princess as High Elf Archer goes off to confront the one who stops the waters, Mokile Mobimbe, a large sauropod creature. Remembering High Elf Archer's description of an elephant, Goblin Slayer wonders aloud though if Moleke Mobimbe said elephant, only to be corrected by the High Elf Archer. No, it's not. It's not an elephant. Alrighty, episode 19. So, as Mokele Mobinbe begins its charge towards the elven village, High Elf Archer realizes that there is a goblin riding on his back, controlling it. Not wanting to hurt the one who stops the waters, High Elf Archer asks for Goblin Slayer to come up with a plan that deals with the goblin but keeps Mokele Mobinbe unharmed. Dwarf Shaman suggests just shooting the goblin immediately so Goblin Slayer can lead an attack against Mokele Mubinbe, as Priestess told Cowgirl and Guild Girl to go to safety to the guest room so that they can throw them more of Goblin Slayer's tools. Despite Shining Helm's protest and hoping they'd allow the Elven Guards to handle the situation, High Elf Archer laughs him off, however, as she swings onto the battle, killing the goblin and allowing Lizard Priest to cast Roar and the Dwarf Shaman to cast Stupor. Dazed, Mokele Mobinbe is tripped by Goblin Slayer's rope that Cowgirl and Guild Girl threw down to him. After the battle, Shining Helm admits he is impressed, and after being questioned about any more villages, Goblin Slayer begins planning his hunt for the goblins. That night, Forest Princess sneaks out of an emergency meeting to talk with her little sister about coming back home, to which High Elf Archer disagrees to. Forest Princess, however, warns her about how short human lives are in comparison to elves, making it clear she sees High Elf Archer's attraction to Goblin Slayer. High Elf Archer fires back that she'd rather spend more time with her friends, saying how goodbyes are just part of mortal life, as she promises to return someday. During a recess from the meeting, Shining Helm holds a council with Goblin Slayer about the goblin situation and the plan of attack. However, Dwarf Shaman takes a moment to get the groom-to-be drunk with good food and wine with the Lizard Priest. As the duo playfully tease Shining Helm, Goblin Slayer agrees with Shining Helm that goblins making a nest near a major elven village is indeed strange, almost stupid on their part. However, he also points out that elves, due to their long lifespans, do tend to take forever to notice and deal with the problem, surmising the goblins were just ignored until they grew to be bold enough to attack the village. The conversation turns to Shining Helm admitting he doesn't understand his future sister-in-law, and upon hearing Goblin Slayer himself had a sister, Helm admitted Goblin Slayer himself had a sister, chastises Goblin Slayer, berating him for being nothing but a burden to her, arguing that she took care of him because she loved him, and, as a survivor, needs to live for her, something Dwarf Shaman and Lizard Priest agree with. Back at the Temple of the Supreme God, Sword Maiden has deciphered the tablets Goblin Slayer brought to her previously. Realizing the sheer danger he discovered, Sword Maiden gleefully realizes Goblin Slayer had helped her immensely, but laments that he most likely won't be interested in what she found, asking one of her attendants to bring her a note and a carrier pigeon. Her attendant begs her not to waste resources on another failed love letter for Goblin Slayer. Sword Maiden, however, reveals that this is actually a serious situation and the note is for the chief of the elves. As Goblin Slayer prepares to go on the hunt, Cowgirl asks him to stay safe, to which he asks her the same. As he leaves, Cowgirl playfully chastises Guild Girl for hiding, as she didn't want Goblin Slayer to see her without makeup, only to be reminded she's pretty already, and Goblin Slayer wouldn't have cared either way. As he prepares for the launch off with a boat prepared by Shining Helm, Goblin Slayer requests a second boat after Shining Helm warns him of a fog, using the second boat manned by Lizard Priest Dragontooth warriors as a diversion. Goblin Slayer and Lizard Priest are able to get the party up the river and find the goblin's nest in an abandoned dam fortress. The party, though horrified to find the perimeter surrounded by the bodies of elves and other adventurers impaled like Vlad the Impaler style, showing how bold and depraved these particular goblins have grown. Inside, Goblin Slayer and the party explore and take stock of the area, surmising a strong goblin shaman took control of Mokele Mobinbe earlier and realized that the sauropod might return here as they commit bodies of adventurers to the river for proper burial. However, the party instead finds the goblins have been using the old wine press to press the bodies of their captives, causing their blood, organs, and waste to pollute the river in an attempt to poison and curse the elven village. As they rest, Goblin Slayer apologizes to High Elf Archer for the adventure being a goblin slaying quest yet again. High Elf Archer, however, admits this time is different and personal, as she takes note of the sheer depravity of the goblins here seem to have a negative effect on the priestess, as she goes to comfort her. Episode 20. As Goblin Slayer and his party continue to investigate the ruined elven fortress the goblins have taken over, Goblin Slayer deduces Mokile Mobimbe's recent rampages are because there is a shaman among the horde controlling the beasts. Realizing this complicates the extermination, Lizard Priest strategizes and comes up with an attack formation. Goblin Slayer at the point, himself and Dwarf Shaman at the flanks, and High Elf Archer Guardian Priestess in the rear as she gives support. Before the battle starts, High Elf Archer thanks her friends for helping her village in the time of need, while she has invited them for an older sister's wedding. They reassure her they don't mind and prepare for battle. The attack goes smoothly, with High Elf Archer even wounding the Goblin Shaman, but the Goblin Shaman retaliates and casts Poison Cloud, paralyzing the entire party besides Priestess. Seeing her entire party about to be brutalized like her first party, Priestess counterattacks by angrily casting Purify on the Goblin Shaman's wound, turning his blood into purified water, which causes panic in the Goblin ranks. Realizing that she has cast a defensive miracle in an offensive manner, Priestess breaks down, realizing that she has blasphemed with a gift from the Earth Mother. Goblin Slayer is able to swiftly recover and reassures her that she did the right thing as she and Dwarf Shaman help High Elf Archer and Lizard Priest recover. Quickly, the party jump over the ramparts and the fortress using Dwarf Shaman's falling control to gently float down. The recovered Goblin Shaman tries to reorganize his army but realizes the fortress is being flooded, causing a mini tidal wave to drown the remainder of his army. Outside, Dwarf Shaman reveals the party has prepared his tunnel spell earlier to flood the fortress in case of emergency. Despite their victory, Priestess has a minor internal crisis of faith over her previous blasphemy. Wonders if she's still capable of being a priest. Sensing her conflict, Goblin Slayer directs her attention at the rainbow that had materialized over the liberated fortress, setting her worries against her. Elsewhere, Hero and her party, Sword Saint and Sage, and the demon realm, delivering righteous justice to the demons. As Hero gets her Doom Slayer on, Sage senses that the flow of water has been liberated back to the ruined elven fortress, making her job of sealing the portal the demon were trying to exploit easier. As Sword Saint defends her, she wonders aloud who had liberated the ruined elven fortress and destroyed the magic circle the demons were using there, as she has no faith the elves took care of the situation so quickly. It's revealed that the tablets Goblin Slayer found earlier and gave to the Sword Maiden told that the demons had found a way to breach the mortal realm. So Sword Maiden called Hero in to hold the demons off until someone closed the magic circle in the ruined elven fortress. Hero takes the unexpected turn of events as fortunate, continues to lay waste to the demons before her. Back at the elven village, the wedding of Forest Princess and Shining Helm is performed successfully. As the ceremony concludes and the after-party begins, Dwarf Shaman and Lizard Priest enjoy telling stories to the curious elves, and Goblin Slayer questions High Elf Archer if she's staying home. High Elf Archer answers she still wants to keep adventuring for a while and admits despite being away from home for about 5 years, that's the equivalent to just a few days to an elven people, but has promised to exchange letters with her worried sister. Goblin Slayer admits he is happy High Elf Archer's older sister was able to get married, silently remembering his older sister was never able to because she took care of him. High Elf Archer reassures him that he's become a great man and needs to stop berating himself up as she goes off to enjoy the party. High Elf Archer goes to the priestess, sensing her unease from earlier, asks her to pray to the Earth Mother for her sister's marriage to be filled with good fortune. As she prays, a gentle gust of wind blows from the forest, signaling that priestess's prayer had reached the Earth Mother and she was able to continue as a priest in her name. At that, High Elf Archer urges her, Cowgirl, and Guild Girl to join the other elven maidens as her sister prepares to toss the flower crown into the group. As she tosses it, all the young women reach out for the flower crown and the promise to be the next one to find love. Afterward, High Elf Archer states that she and her friends partied for 3 days and 3 nights straight before returning to the frontier town. She also states her sister's letter hasn't arrived since she's returned, hinting that the elves are still celebrating the wedding events as she speaks. Episode 21. So years ago, on the 9th floor of the Dungeon of the Dead, young Bishop battles alongside her adventuring party to slay demons and claim a treasure chest. Working alongside fellow priest Miramond Monk, young Bishop created a barrier and a cast silence to allow a female wizard to cast a large spell of half-elf scout and female warrior to take out demons alongside Captain. Victorious, young Bishop remarks that they are on her map and thanks God that she didn't encounter goblins. In present, Goblin Slayer leads his party against a massive sea serpent off the coast, while High Elf Archer finds her arrows not very effective. Goblin Slayer and Wizard Priest are able to wound it with harpoons, causing it to retreat temporarily. Priestess remembers back to how they got into the situation, having accepted a quest to deal with sea goblins, raiding local fisheries. However, much to their shock, the party discovers that the sea goblins are actually gillmen being harassed by a sea serpent who had come to the shallows. Since there are no goblins, Goblin Slayer debated abandoning the quest completely. But the others convinced him to stay and help the gillmen. Back in the fight, Dwarf Shaman is able to cast Water Walk as the serpent, causing it to suffocate without water. Back at the guild, Goblin Slayer gives his report to Guild Girl, comically stating there were no goblins, as she tries to decipher the particulars. Dividing the rewards from the Gilman, Lizard Priest claims a small dragon skull, and High Elf Archer a gold medallion for her sister, Forest Princess. While Dwarf Shaman claims a shelled staff, Priestess takes the pearls to donate to Earth Mother Temple. Goblin Slayer simply takes a shiny seashell to gift to Cowgirl, much to her delight. The next day, Sword Maiden comes to the guild requesting Goblin Slayer's protection as a bodyguard. She needs to go to the capital, but roaming goblin packs have been spotted on the road, so Goblin Slayer agrees to escort her. As they leave, Goblin Slayer bids farewell to Cowgirl, whose closeness to him makes Sword Maiden and Priestess jealous. That night, Sword Maiden attempts to get closer to Goblin Slayer, but to no avail as the Roman goblins attack. As Goblin Slayer leaves the defense, he leaves the offense to Lizard Priest and Dwarf Shaman. As morning comes, Goblin Slayer inspects the bodies, surmising that there is a larger tribe behind the attack, and takes note of the black hand tattoo the goblins are wearing. Arriving at the capital, the party is held up by city guard, customs, and paperwork until Sword Saint expedites the process whenever she reveals the party as her bodyguards. Entering the capital, Priestess is left awestruck until she overhears Goblin Slayer wishing he could have brought his older sister to the city once. Alright, episode 22. So, in her room, the princess, a young girl looking identical to the priestess, openly complains to her maid about her elder brother, the king, not letting her leave the castle. As her maid reminds her of the dangers outside of the castle, Princess reminds her that the king used to be an adventurer as well, yet his refusal to allow her to become one is hypocrisy to her. She also mentions a flaming star has fallen recently that she wants to investigate, yet she's reminded she's not supposed to bring that up, which further annoys her. As her brother returns to the castle, Princess takes note that her maid's cousin is a merchant who leaves the capital daily, and she makes plans to sneak out that night. As Goblin Slayer and his party drop off Sword Maiden at her temple, he, Dwarf Shaman, and Lizard Priest go off to the tavern before he goes to the temple library for research. At the tavern, Dwarf Shaman and Lizard Priest sense Goblin Slayer is bothered by something, revealing his recent seaside adventure and current escort mission have kept him from slaying goblins. Despite that, though, Goblin Slayer admits he's having fun and he believes this isn't right for him, which shocks his companions. Both relate to him how his usual constant slaying of goblins were indeed a righteous deed, but he needs to experience life as well in order to better hone his abilities. Hearing this, Goblin Slayer is reminded how viciously his mentor, Burglar, trained him, but also imparted very useful information like this. Elsewhere, Priestess and the High Elf Archer visit a graveyard to pay respects to Wizard, and mentioning that she's met her little brother Wizard Boy. As she walks by, High Elf Archer senses Priestess needs some uplifting and takes her to the large public bath spa to unwind. As they merrily have fun, Priestess is approached by an incognito princess who inquires about her class, rank, and equipment. Priestess politely answers and, believing she is another fresh-starting rookie, gives her advice. However, as she and High Elf Archer prepare to leave, Priestess realizes her equipment has been stolen and finds her purse elsewhere full of precious gems she left as compensation for the theft. Learning her chainmail, the first thing Goblin Slayer praised her for getting, was gone, as well as all the rest of her equipment. Priestess breaks down as High Elf Archer vows to get it back for her. That night, as the party is reassembled and consoling Priestess for the theft of her equipment, Sword Maiden gives Goblin Slayer the book he was looking for. In a rather seductive manner, Sword Maiden tries to advise Goblin Slayer on how he should offer words of encouragement to Priestess in her time of vulnerability. Goblin Slayer, however, counters with the tale of his father's hunting knife and how it was meant to be passed down to him, how it was stolen and he never found it, advising, things get lost. Seeing his inability to solve the problem, Sword Maiden promises to bring the matter up to the proper authorities tomorrow, as Goblin Slayer combs through the book for the symbol he found on the goblins the day before. The next day, the royal court hold their court on the recent matters of the realm. Court mage, gold-ranked Padfoot, and royal guardsmen discuss the flaming star that had fallen on the holy mountain and debate on whether it is an ill omen that Hero and her party will need to be called in. Red-haired Cardinal brings up the recent cult surrounding the God of Wisdom and corrects his comparatives on how this god is destructive to those it blesses, quote unquote. Sword Maiden then brings up the manner of Priestess's stolen equipment and reiterates her desire for the goblin issue to be taken more seriously. To which the king agrees to look into the stolen goods for her. Female merchant takes the floor and reports her progress of the training centers for young adventurers, adding she'd like to add meals and lodging for rookies, something the king agrees to, but worries about the budget. As she suggests having the training centers take charge of the sewer patrols from the guild, elderly minister suggests they could also regulate goblin slaying quests. They could regulate goblin slaying quests to them as well to better handle Sword Maiden's request on the matter. But takes it back whenever the ladies give him a stern look. The king agrees, but stipulates he'd rather have the training centers handle the sewer patrols at the moment with silver-haired maid's approval. Suddenly, the princess's maid burst into the room, revealing Princess, who had borrowed quote-unquote priestess's equipment earlier, had been captured by the cult of goblins Goblin Slayer had run into earlier. Though horrified and worried, the king explains he cannot just send the army to save her after his numerous refusals to take care of the goblin threats, before which would make him a hypocrite. Seeing they need a trustworthy adventurer, quote-unquote, the royal court tries to deduce the location of the goblin's nest, only to realize that they are in the dungeon of the dead. Knowing not just any adventurer could survive the dungeon, the royal court requests Sword Maiden handle the situation, as she conquered it with her party in her youth. Sensing her PTSD and fears, female merchant summons Goblin Slayer, who volunteers to slay the goblins for them. Episode 23. So as the hero and her party attend the meeting with the king and the royal court, Sword Saint and Sage question why they were summoned, as Goblin Slayer was tasked with the important emergency quest. The king instead requests they handle another quest for him, to which the hero excitedly accepts without learning the particulars, much to her party members and even the royal court members' exacerbation. She is tasked with investigating the fiery star that fell in the north, and she immediately accepts, nearly forging any reward details until her party members halt her excitement. As the hero party and the royal court banter, King silently prays for Goblin Slayer's victory in saving his sister, the princess. As Goblin Slayer and his party prepare to move on, female merchant helps them with all their needed supplies, grateful to help her friends in any way. High Elf Archer then brings up the real possibility that is already too late, quote-unquote, to save the princess, and wonders how Priestess is feeling given Princess is the culprit who stole her belongings. Priestess, however, admits while she is upset, she cannot allow someone to be left at the mercy of the goblins, much to Dwarf Shaman and Lizard Priest approval. Before leaving, Sword Maiden appears and thanks Goblin Slayer for saving her from the royal court's request and gives Lizard Priest a map of the Dungeon of the Dead and warns them of the great dangers in the dungeon. Goblin Slayer leaves his research of the Goblin Mark with her, hoping she will make better use of what he had found. After leaving, Sword Maiden and Female Merchant wonder if they'll ever be able to get back into the field, but Sword Maiden admits her PTSD may be far too painful for her. But Female Merchant vows to do all she can in the background until she can rejoin her friends. During their investigation of the scene, Priestess finds her staff, and with no signs of death or assault, Dwarf Shaman deduces because she's a princess. The goblins needed her as a sacrifice. Making their way to the Dungeon of the Dead, the party sneaks in, but are immediately detected, but are able to win with another one of Goblin Slayer's gate scrolls, linked to the sky this time. Priestess wonders if she'll be useful, but is reinvigorated whenever Goblin Slayer admits he has a plan for her to come. Elsewhere, at the top of the mountain, the hero and her party battle an alien creature that came from the fallen star. However, its intelligence, or lack thereof, due to absorbing the dead goblins that Goblin Slayer sent into the sky earlier, allows the party of heroines to easily counter and slay the eldritch horror. Basically, it looks almost like a Cthulhu-esque type character. As they slay it, however, Sage questions where, how, and why the goblins ended at the top of the mountain, but Hero tells her not to think about it too much. Back in the Dungeon of the Dead, Priestess uses her Holy Light ability to blind the goblins as she identifies the leader as a goblin priest. As the goblin priest casts a barrier, he orders his warriors to die against the party, who are slaughtered by them with ease. Priestess then realizes the priest is attempting to use the princess as a sacrifice and has wanted the wholesale slaughter of his minions to pull more and more blood into the magic circle. Reacting immediately, Priestess casts Purify, which turns all the blood into water and ruins the goblin priest's plans as his minions die. He attempts to use Princess as a shield, but he is easily dispatched by Goblin Slayer, who simply kicks him in the crotch. Alrighty, and the last episode of the season. So, it's also titled, "Oh Prayers, Have You Been Oh Prayers, Have You Reached Heaven?" So, thanks to Priestess casting the Purify miracle, Goblin Slayer is able to fatally wound the Goblin Priest and stop the ritual he was trying to perform. With the princess saved, Priestess goes to comfort her, but not before reclaiming her chainmail. Confused at what happened, High Elf Archer and Lizard Priest deduced that the Goblin Priest was trying to resurrect a dark god, while Dwarf Shaman realizes that some goblins are still alive up top, meaning the return trip will be problematic. During their planning, however, the Goblin Priest uses himself as a sacrifice to revive the dark god he wanted to revive, and is partially successful, reviving a large demon hand. The hand begins wreaking havoc on the party, casting large-scale ice spells that Lizard Priest manages to tank, but leaves him immobilized. Dwarf Shaman is able to create an ice wall to buff the storm, but a sudden attack from the hand manages to wound High Elf Archer pretty good. Coming up with a plan, Goblin Slayer is able to distract the hand so Priestess can open the elevator and have the hand fall in. Using her barrier miracle, Priestess holds the hand in place, and after a great struggle, the coming elevator crushes the hand. Returning to the surface of the Dungeon of the Dead, the tired and injured party is confronted by the rest of the Goblin Horde. Seeing their options limited, they are saved at the last second by Sword Maiden, who arrives with a small army of warrior priests and paladins of the multiple temples of the gods. Goblin Slayer reveals he sent her a note earlier, detailing the enemies were not goblins, but evil non-player characters who worship demons, but admits the decision to come and help was up to her. Despite Sword Maiden's obvious fears of the goblins, she's able to keep a strong face with her alligator familiar protecting her and lays waste to the goblins. Back at the capital, a corrupt noble reveals that he is in league with a dark wizard serving chaos. As they monologue their perfect, unquote, plan, to use the goblins to kidnap the princess and sacrifice her to resurrect the dark god. They planned on having it merge with the alien creature so it could take the form of princess and control her brother, the king, with it. With that, the corrupt noble admits he's not alone in viewing the king as quote unquote just a lousy adventurer who became king through luck, and states his plan B is to fake false claims that the princess was violated by the goblins or tainted by chaos. Suddenly, the Knight of Diamonds crashes their meeting and reveals his true identity to them. Realizing the jig is up, the forces of chaos trying to counterattack, but the Knight of Diamonds, with silver-haired thief, tear them apart. Arriving back at the western frontier, Guild Girl is shocked to hear that Goblin Slayer refused a reward for saving the noble woman captured by goblins, but instead took the usual bounty for goblin slaying. Priestess and High Elf Archer agree that it was more Goblin Slayer style than a grand fancy reward. After Guild Girl also reveals to them a fortress of heretics was destroyed in the capital, Priestess laments how growing and maturing are hard work. But after giving some encouragement, Guild Girl mentions that recently the princess has become a devout follower of the Earth Mother. This saddens Priestess, as at first, who silently believes this means she is too late to save Princess from being violated by the goblins, but is told she joined the temple as a full cleric due to, quote-unquote, meeting a cleric of the Earth Mother and wanted to be just like her. Hearing this, Priestess is renewed with confidence, realizing she not only saved the princess's life, her chastity, and virtue, but she also inspired her to become something even greater. Returning home, Goblin Slayer walks up his path, the pathway, reaffirming his admiration for Priestess, Female Merchant, and Sword Maiden for overcoming their trauma and moving forward. He reflects on his adventure of late, hoping Wizard Boy and Rhea Fighter become friendlier with his pure Spearman and Heavy Warrior, going to the wedding of the Forest Princess, and finally rescuing the princess. Cowgirl comes to greet him at the end of this, and Goblin Slayer reaffirms who he is and what he does whenever it comes to a close. Basically saying, I'm Goblin Slayer and I slay goblins. But that is an entire overview for Season 2 Goblin Slayer. If there's anything else that you guys would like me to try to cover and do a deep dive on, I would be more than happy to. Leave it in the comments, and we will see you guys on the next one.